Okay, so welcome. Thanks for giving us your time. As I said, we've got a really full hour for you today. We're going to start off with John Young, INASP Executive Director. He's going to give a very brief introduction to INASP, and then we're quickly moving on to Joanna Wild. Joanna's our Senior Programme Specialist in Online Capacity Development, and she's going to be sharing what we consider to be some key success factors in online learning, and also give some pointers on areas that you might want to pay attention to if you're thinking about using online approaches in your own capacity development. And then John will be chatting with our panel of digital learning experts. So we have Andy Nobes, who oversees INASP's AuthorAid project, Veronika Schaeffler, our online pedagogy expert, and Ravi Murugesan, a technical developer and facilitator for our massive online open courses. So we're going to try and leave as much time as we can at the end to answer your questions. John, if you could just move to the housekeeping slide. If you'd like to ask a question to our speakers, please do type that question in the chat area. We're going to try and endeavour to answer as many of your questions as we can during the Q&A, but if there are lots of outstanding questions, then we might write a blog post following this session to answer any of those remaining questions, and we'll share that over the next week or so. So as I said when we first opened the waiting room, we do have a large audience today, so we have muted all the participants, but you do use the chat. And we will be sharing slides and a recording of the session within 24 hours. So I think that's everything for our preamble. So I'll hand over now to John to set the scene.
Very good. Thank you very much, Verity, and welcome everybody. It's very good that so many of you have been able to join us. As many of you probably know, INASP has been around a very long time, coming up to 30 years. And our vision is research and knowledge at the heart of development. And our mission is to support individuals and institutions to produce, share and use research and knowledge to transform lives. And of course, in that time, in that 30 years, there have been huge and important investments in knowledge systems around the world. But those tend to favour a small number of institutions in capital cities, and many researchers, policymakers and practitioners have missed out. Their voices aren't heard. Their talent is wasted, and research which could be useful isn't used. So our new strategy is all about unleashing this talent by promoting what we call more equitable knowledge ecosystems. And what we mean by that is a knowledge ecosystem where men and women have equal access to skills, knowledge and careers in research, policy and practice, where all academic and policy organisations have equal access to resources and knowledge, and create conditions for staff to produce and use knowledge, where all forms of knowledge are considered equally important, and where mechanisms exist for all stakeholders to be able to collaborate and find evidence-based solutions to problems. And our Pathways to Change infographic shows how we hope to contribute to this by working with individuals and with organisations and with systems to strengthen how knowledge is produced and used by individuals within organisations as part of the wider knowledge ecosystem. And we've been working online for many years, probably most of our life. We've been working online, initially setting up systems so that Southern researchers could more easily access Northern journals, then setting up online systems for Southern journals, then training Southern researchers to publish, journal editors to improve the quality of their journals. And initially, quite a lot of this training was done face-to-face, but then we saw that we could reach far more people by providing some of our material online. It's always important, of course, to make sure that the online material is what's needed, and so needs to be combined with a strong face-to-face work, and we call this blended learning. But our strategy envisages that we will do more online work. This is an important direction of change in our strategy. And of course, the COVID-19 crisis makes this even more important, strengthening Southern research capacity and also having to use online approaches. The virus behaves differently in different countries, different responses are needed. The responses need to be designed and delivered by national researchers, policymakers and practitioners who have the best technical, social and cultural understanding to know what might work. And of course, international travel restrictions and national lockdowns have meant that we have to do more and more of that virtually. And we're doing well, all of our work online now. The other important direction of change in our new strategy is to transform the way that we work, to be more collaborative, to work with others on their projects, as well as to invite them to work with us on ours. And if we want to see lasting change, we need to work as part of a global coalition for change, a coalition in which we're just one actor among many, each bringing their unique attributes to the table, which is why we thought it would be useful to share some of the expertise we've built up over the last 27 years in online learning. And now, this is the point I hand over to Joanna to tell you all about that. So Joanna, I'll stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours.
Thank you, John. Try to share my screen now. Can you see my screen or not yet?
Yes.
Yes?
Oh, hang on.
Not yet. Okay. Now it should work. Share. Okay. Yes? Hello, everyone. As John says, we've been delivering online and online learning as part of our capacity development approaches for a number of years now. So we would like to share with you what we think makes our approach to online successful. So we think it's these 4 key aspects, and I'll take each one and go into a bit more detail. Firstly, we spent time carefully thinking about what digital technology can mean for the context of our work. We have developed our own digital principles that help us make decisions about when and how to use digital technology to deliver our work. And they reflect our values and experience and help us prioritize and not forget what's most important. Secondly, our work is based on evidence of what works. So for the past 6 years of delivering a variety of online and blended courses, we have been learning and systematically collecting feedback from our interventions. This has helped us to identify key factors that need to be considered before designing any online intervention, and which we then integrated into our own scoping and design process. Thirdly, as our online learning moved from piloting phase to being fully integrated into our capacity development, we had to find the right methodology to guide our approach. We chose learning design. It's a methodology originated in research on effective online course design. There are 4 distinct characteristics to learning design. Firstly, it puts the learner rather than the facilitator at the center of the design process. Secondly, it's explicit in nature. In a good online learning design, a learning designer will use the knowledge of the audience to predict what the learners might struggle with, what kind of misconceptions they bring to learning, what kind of questions they might ask at what stage. And a learning designer uses this knowledge to address this aspect in advance within the learning design. Thirdly, learning design is participatory. At INASP, our course design team consists of a content developer, often an external person commissioned to do the work. This person then works very closely together with our internal online pedagogy expert, our technical developer, and 2 to 3 critical friends from the target audience. Finally, the design process is iterative. There are frequent feedback loops and adaptations, and we revise our design decisions with new information coming in, and it's really important. As you can imagine, the whole process is time-consuming and costly. However, in online learning, the game really comes from being able to rerun the courses several times without major adaptations. And the better and more explicit your learning design is, the better the learning flow, the less moderation is needed, and facilitation can focus on important aspects of learning itself. So far, I've talked to our approach being principled, based on learning and experience, and theory formed. Fourthly, and finally, we take an integrated approach to using online learning. It means that we recognize that online learning is complementary to more traditional approaches to capacity development. We do not simply seek to replace approaches such as workshops with online modes of delivery. Instead, we use digital technology to enhance what we do. It gives us, for example, an extra space where learning can happen in between and after face-to-face interventions. It helps us ensure continuity of learning through a series of engagements rather than just one-off interventions. It helps us embed learning into a real context of work and at the point of need. It also provides an opportunity to do things differently, to use both digital and physical spaces to their greatest advantage and in the best combination. So at INASP, online approaches are part of a bigger learning journey. Now, we are talking about all those principles right in the time of crisis, and we do acknowledge that a lot of us are having to transition to online out of necessity rather than what was planned in the first place and as the best means to achieve your goals. So in the times of COVID, we recognize that we need to take advantage even more of what digital technology can offer. We need to be more creative, we need to think outside of the box, and at the same time, we need to understand what the limitations of technology are. Sometimes the best approach is the face-to-face one, and although going online might not be ideal, we can still seek to find a solution that will be pedagogically sound and will help us achieve the outcomes. For example, it might require more time and effort to achieve what we want to achieve if it's done totally remotely. So what we need to do is to acknowledge that in the planning phase. So what we think it's most important is to rethink the initial design of your project and then be honest about what can and what cannot be delivered online. So re-evaluating the purpose of an intervention would be the best place to start. What then do we need to think about right now in terms of delivery in an online only environment? Firstly, people and pedagogy should always come in front before technology. In years of delivering online learning, we have learned that you really need to build in a scoping activity at the beginning of your digital project. It doesn't have to cost a lot of effort and time, but you need to find a quick and efficient way of getting to know your audience. The questions to explore should include aspects such as learning habits that are culturally grounded and are difficult very often to unlearn. You will want to explore existing communication channels. So does your audience already use certain technologies to communicate? Can you tap into these instead of cognitively overloading your learners? Because what you really want them to do is to focus on learning first and not grappling with technology. Other important aspects to understand are bandwidth limitations, access to devices, and digital literacy skills. And if you collect answers to those and other questions, you will be able to make informed decisions about the type of technology you use, whether the communication should be asynchronous or synchronous, whether your course should be blended or fully online. For us at INASP, the priority is people, not platforms, and in order to avoid a new digitally based divide, it is important to put learning first and see technology as a means to an end. Too often, online is also seen as simply changing the medium of delivery without changing pedagogy. So we might be tempted to think, okay, we've got this workshop with all the slides, resources, and activities. Why don't we put them online and scale up the learning opportunity to more people at lower cost? The truth, however, is that classroom dynamics in an online space are very, very different to face-to-face settings. Online learning requires more explicit and thoughtful design, which takes time. And it requires taking into consideration lack of visual clues, slower responses, delayed feedback. But online space is also bring advantages. Learners can learn at their own pace and revisit recorded discussions. Activities can be designed in a way that encourages immediate application of what is learned in the context of workplace. So the key message we want to give you, whatever you do, don't replicate face-to-face, step back and look anew at the purpose of your capacity development intervention and how online pedagogy and digital technology can enhance what you do. We have also learned from the success of our massive open online courses, MOOCs, that social presence is one of the key factors in maintaining participants' engagement on a course and reducing dropout rates. It helps learners know that they aren't alone in their learning journey and that they can learn and navigate meaning together. So well-planned peer activities and facilitated group discussions can aid social learning and knowledge co-creation. Online learning offers an opportunity to reach harder to reach demographics and locations. Our auto-rate courses are accessed by people in countries and regions affected by conflict and unrest, and also by displaced people. We have seen that online courses tend to have a better gender balance than face-to-face training. It can be easier for people with caring responsibilities to attend to courses if they don't have to travel, and courses that are more flexible. So knowing that we reach those diverse demographics has helped us think about how best to serve learners in less accessible situations. Our courses are low bandwidth and mostly as asynchronous. We do build in media, such as videos and opportunities to have live sessions, but they are always an enrichment to learning experience rather than a compulsory element of the course. We also design for flexible deadlines. We offer downloadable versions of online lessons. We design for mobile learning. And in that sense, what we try to do is to offer as personalized learning experience to everyone as it is possible. It is also important to think about users who are differently abled, for example, through choice of media, choice of images, colors, fonts, using screen reading technology, adding subtitles, and using alt text on images. Finally, all of INASP's capacity development approaches are underpinned by principles of sustainability and local ownership. So we want to make sure that we support lasting change and that capacity development continues even if we are no longer involved. With this in mind, our course materials are developed and structured into packages that can be easily downloaded and customized and embedded into partners' own digital platforms. It is important to apply a sustainability lens from the very beginning of any digital project. So from early on, we work together with our partners to understand what is possible in their context, and we are tailoring our design to local needs. In this way, our courses can persist in a variety of formats and ways of delivery, depending on what will maximize their use and engagement. We also try to convert facilitated courses we developed into self-study online tutorials so that anyone can use them at any time. So to recap our key recommendations to you, think people first. Technology should be a means to an end and not an end in itself. Design for online, use the advantages on online space, do not simply replicate face-to-face approaches. Build for a community, so social and facilitator presence are key to engagement and co-creation of knowledge. Apply inclusivity lens at all times. You want to avoid creating a new digitally based divide. And finally, build sustainability from the beginning of your project. In the end, what you really want to achieve is to ensure the local ownership of capacity development.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed, Joanna. Clearly a lot of experience there. Before I start interviewing the panel, let me just remind you who they are. We've got Ravi, he's our technology guru. He maintains and develops our online learning platform. Joanna is an expert on learning design, heads up our technology enhanced learning team. Veronika has been involved in online learning for 25 years and is also an expert on adult pedagogy. And Andy manages the AuthorAid website, but more importantly than that, he actually is the lead facilitator for the whole of the network. So that's kind of what they do. We've got 4 questions. Three of them you've seen already in the Eventbrite invitation. We've added a 4th one. I'm going to ask each one of them to lead on one of the questions and then go around the rest of the panel to see if they have anything to add. So first, Ravi, can you share examples of Southern-led technology or uses of technology that INASP uses, and what can we learn from these examples?
Thank you, John. So the first thing I'd like to say is we got started with our online learning initiative at INASP nearly 9 years back in 2011. And at that time, we decided to use an open source learning management system, also known as an LMS, as a foundation for our work. And the LMS we chose is Moodle, which is the most widely used open source LMS around the world. In fact, the study found that Moodle's market share could be well over 75% at African institutions that use an LMS. And well, it's an application, and there are other systems like this. But I would say the philosophy behind open source software is that it empowers users instead of merely giving them a piece of technology to use, whether free of cost or not. For example, over the past couple of weeks, I live in South India and I work from home. Even before the pandemic, I've been working from home for many years. So these days, over the past 2 weeks, I've been carrying out quality assurance tests for the latest version of Moodle because I want to know more about the Moodle application and the latest features. At INASP, we might be upgrading to this particular version, so that's also one reason for my interest. And my geographical base is not a limiting factor. As for setting up a Moodle site, while setting up a full-fledged site can be a substantial technical task, it's very easy to set up a small-scale Moodle site using the Moodle Cloud service, which is, there are free options and they're provided by the Moodle organization, starting with about 50 users. And we've seen some of our partners in a few countries using this service to run local small-scale Moodle sites. There's even an interesting project called Moodle Box that allows teachers to set up and manage a localized Moodle site in an offline environment. So kind of an example of the flexibility inherent in open source applications. So just a few words about INASP's online courses. We host them on our Moodle site, which we simply call INASP Moodle. Our courses have a variety of content and activities, such as interactive learning resources, quizzes, forums, all developed with an awareness of internet constraints common in the global south. And where possible, we make our courses compatible with a Moodle mobile app, considering the high usage of smartphones across the developing world. So yeah, those are a few points about the technology aspects of our work. Back to you, John.
Very good, thanks a lot, Ravi. Andy, do you want to add anything about some of the other technologies that have bubbled up recently?
Yes, hi everyone. I guess one thing that does come to mind is WhatsApp. And in the AuthorAid project in particular, we've ended up using WhatsApp in both planned and quite unplanned ways as well. And this first occurred in 2017, when a WhatsApp group was organically started by participants who just finished an online course that we just did and wanted to stay in touch. And so this happened without any real prompting from us, and the group quickly reached its 256 member limit. It kind of took us by surprise because we weren't really aware that WhatsApp was that popular in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. So this group is still going today, and it's kind of inspired us to launch some other initiatives, like a pilot scheme to do some online journal clubs, which used a variety of different social media platforms, but WhatsApp was by far the most popular. So it would seem that the participants, the researchers in our network, are more than comfortable to be using this app, and they're using it at work and at home, sometimes whilst traveling. So it makes sense for us to utilize this platform which already exists, rather than trying to create our own and meet people really where they are. So this is WhatsApp's going to come up for example, keeping in touch before and after the course, a side channel within online courses or workshops, and sometimes even it's become a learning platform in itself.
Very good. Thanks a lot, Andy. We'll have lots of time at the end if people want to explore this area in more detail. But I'd like to move on to the second question, which goes to Joanna. How can we adapt physical capacity development events to a digital-only environment? You started talking about that in your talk, but also we've been tracking the questions which have come in, and there's several people who are particularly interested to learn to have some concrete examples of these scoping exercises you mentioned in your presentation, or whether you could illustrate some of those in your answer.
Mm-hmm. So with respect to your first question, John, how can we adapt physical capacity development events to digital only environment? So first question is why, to ask yourself is why are you adapting in first place? So whether it's a pedagogical decision, for instance, that you make an adaptation because there are advantages that online learning can bring over face-to-face, or is it an access-based decision? So for instance, wanting to scale up to this learning opportunity to more people. It can be also a decision resulting from a particular situation, such as currently COVID-19, where we are moving some activities online just because it's the only space we can work with at the moment. So starting with why is really important. And whatever is the reason, you need to step back and think anew about the learning design. Too often people talk about just putting things online in terms of transferring slides, lectures to an online platform and creating discussions and activities around it. It's great if you have some content coming from the face-to-face workshops and interventions, because you can work with it. But before you start combining together the content, we suggest you look anew at you know, the affordances of online space. What is it really that it can bring to your learners, and how you can work with that. For example, to just give you an example, in the past we delivered a face-to-face workshop for librarians on monitoring electronic resource usage, and we saw an opportunity to deliver the training to more people through an online version. And we had materials from the workshop, we had PowerPoint slides, we have activities, but we completely changed the learning design to use the advantages of online. So we designed the course in such a way that it combined theory with the opportunity to apply learning immediately within the workplace. And this was possible just by stretching the course over a few weeks instead of like in a workshop, 3 days, and creating an authentic assessment or assignment for the participants to take into their workplace and work with their colleagues on actually putting in practice what they are learning at the same time. So we really try to use the advantages of online space. As to your second question, the examples of scoping activity. So what scoping activity really is a set of questions in particular areas that are very important for the course design. So one of these areas is relevance. So checking what's relevant with your audience in terms of learning needs is the first place to start. Then there are questions around learning culture and communication. So as I mentioned already in my presentations, it's good to find out about learning habits that people already have. We might all appreciate learner-centered approaches to learning, but it's not everywhere the same, and it takes time people to unlearn things. So you want to work with it. You don't want to work against how people's preferences around learning. So it's important to guide them towards new approaches slowly. Communication, as I mentioned, is very important. Where do people already finding out from your audience? So asking really those kind of questions to your audience. How are you communicating? What technologies are you using to communicate? This is how we found out about WhatsApp being one of the key communications tools, and it allowed us to bring in WhatsApp into our course design. Access, another area you really want to know how people cannot access devices, what groups might have problems with accessing devices. So it's really a series of questions that we have identified through our work in the past years that we need to find out the answers first. We call them design considerations before we go into making design decisions.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed, Joanna. And I think the principle is we'll be making some of these more detailed materials available to participants and others after the workshop. But I'd like to move on to the third question, this time to Veronika. What can we do to ensure the sustainability of digital capacity development initiatives? And kind of related to that, several questions have been coming through about how to maintain social interaction and engagement in low bandwidth situations. So maybe you could talk a bit about that at the same time.
Thanks, John, for this good question. In my opinion, there are three very important aspects when you want to ensure the sustainability of digital capacity development initiatives in your organization. The first aspect are, we heard it already from Joanna quite often, the needs of your organization, but of all people involved. And the second aspect, we call it anchoring. That means how to embed the initiative in your organization by creating a supportive environment. And then the third aspect would be the budget, taking care of a sufficient budget. We heard it already also from Joanna already. It's really important that you incorporate sustainability into your planning from the beginning. That means that you need to ask the right questions and that you need to involve all your stakeholders from the beginning to find the answers. You should also have a good monitoring, evaluation and learning design that needs to be made in order to help you to adjust your plans while you are learning on the way. Looking a little bit deeper into the needs, what are the questions that you need to ask? You need to ask, is it really the right time for the initiative? And do we in our organization have a shared understanding that is really relevant for the organization? Obviously now COVID-19 has changed things. Many people may feel now that it is now the right time for introducing, for example, online communication and learning tools and use online technology. But you should check what are the aspects that make it sustainable beyond the lockdown then. Looking at the anchoring aspect, you need to answer questions like, who are the driving forces in your organization? Who are the stakeholders? What are the existing structures where the initiatives need to be embedded? What is the organization's culture? For example, in terms of social interaction and learning styles. Here there was this question, how is it possible to maintain social interaction even during these times? I have this experience, I can see there are some colleagues from Sierra Leone, and there we had the challenge. It's a country where infrastructure is still in development. And we had to make sure to react quite early when we anticipated the lockdown already. We asked around what are the needs of our team, and we really tried very hard to get, for example, modems right in time, that they could communicate through mobile phones, even from home still. And we explored things about how is the communication going on in universities when they close. And we could find different solutions. For one, it was the university portal. For others, again, it was just WhatsApp through mobile phones that we could use. So you need to react quickly in such a situation and try to do your best to adjust to what you have.
Very, very good. Thank you very much. Ooh.
Okay.
Are you carrying on? Sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention this third aspect of the budget, because I think the budget is always something that is also very important, and that needs really to be tailored to your organization. And depending on the initiative, you need to have a short, medium, and long-term budget plan that outlines what to cover. You need to think about what human resources you need, what is the infrastructure and equipment that is available, and what would you need. And again, there, what Joanna already mentioned, we have some tools that help you to ask the right questions, and so that helps us then to run our projects. Thank you. John, I think you need to unmute yourself. We cannot hear you.
Yes, we're all learning, aren't we? Right, very good. Thank you very much indeed. The next question is actually for Andy, and it matches almost exactly a question which has just come in online from somebody called Gude Emery Kasahun. The question is, how can we avoid reinforcing inequities or creating a new digital-based divide? And Gude's question was slightly longer than that. Especially in low-income countries where the majority of people do not have access to this technology. So there you are, an added dimension to your question.
Okay, thanks, John. That's made my question even more difficult. Yes, so what we found is that online can mean, obviously, it's better access for some people, such as those that need flexibility in their learning. We've heard this quite a lot from women participants on our online courses in particular, but it can also mean a worse learning experience for others, such as those with limited digital skills, limited written English, or no access to devices or the internet. Additionally to that, actually online can be an additional burden on top of people's busy schedules. So when you consider that in face-to-face learning, you can expect to get time off work for joining a physical meeting. But in terms of designing for equity, as we've already said, you need to consider the context of all your learners right from the outset. And for us, that has meant design thinking for a worst case scenario kind of way. So for example, our author-aid MOOCs were designed first with learners in particular countries in sub-Saharan Africa in mind. So we went for a simple, low bandwidth, text-based, asynchronous course as default, and then we built upon that. But we also had offline downloadable options to go along with that. So what we found is that you can still have a good online course with strong social presence and facilitator presence through things like structuring your forum activity well, ensuring any posts in the forum are actually answered through using a team of volunteers, and making sure you actually trigger interesting discussions and discussions that are going to be useful for the rest of the group. You can also use peer assessment activities as a way of building social engagement. Picking up again on the importance of asynchronous learning, a lot of current online learning tends to be synchronous, that is via video lectures or Zoom calls. And obviously there are practical issues with this to do with internet bandwidth. And although we know that, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, university internet connections may be improving, recently with the lockdown, we've heard increasingly that many have lost their campus Wi-Fi. And so this is becoming increasingly a social justice issue with the cost of data. But also with asynchronous learning, with synchronous learning, I would argue that it has multiple biases. It has cultural, linguistic biases. There are issues with time zones, particularly when considering an international audience, and also family schedules for those that have got busy family lives. So it's important to remember asynchronous learning as a base if you're dealing with an international audience. I think one last thing, for the purposes of equity, it's also important to keep things simple and in one place quite often. Some online courses go straight for the cutting edge, and I think sometimes you can go too far on the connectivist approach, that is using lots of platforms and tools. So for example, asking somebody to put something on Twitter, post something on a blog, or make a short video, which might have great pedagogical value, but at the same time also relies on high levels of digital literacy and being able to navigate between different accounts, sometimes even devices, which can be, I think, a barrier to inclusion. And so we think that it's more equitable to keep the learners most of the time on one single platform. And in our case, we've used Moodle for that.
Very good. Thanks a lot, Andy. And you might be interested to note that Geba Naupaneb, sorry if the name is wrong, from Nepal says Andy Nobes' answer is very good. So there you are.
Thank you.
An immediate voter. Thanks. Very good. That's probably enough from us. We've got about 20 minutes left. Verity has been monitoring the chat channel and has been pinging me questions while we've been speaking. I've already included some of them. But now let's try and work through some of the rest. We won't have time to answer them all. We'll answer the ones we can. And as Verity said at the beginning, I think we might answer some more subsequently. So here's an interesting one, a topic which we haven't really talked very much about so far, from Robert Gatto. I would wish to hear more about how institutions can go about curating their curriculum and learning content for online delivery. I'm not sure who would be the best one to answer that. I don't know whether it's Veronika or Joanna have a start.
I can answer that. Hello, Robert. I think that in case of especially higher education institutions, what's happening here, for example, there is always a kind of a central unit that supports technology enhanced learning at the institution. And it basically means that it has in the unit a number of people who are learning technologies, who knows both about the pedagogy and technology, and then they go and support departments so that the academics actually can focus on what they want to do with their program, how they can flip the classroom to make a change from being fully face-to-face to online, and finding solutions. So they can find out, you know, what kind of repositories could be institutionally shared so that people can share and use various resources that find online. And also they can provide some standards to everybody and support to everybody in terms of, you know, how to best deliver blended learning in a higher education. So they also support various trainings with, you know, staff development trainings. But what is other aspect that is very, very important is just the culture, institutional culture in higher education of sharing and reuse. This doesn't come easily. So teachers, lecturers are afraid a bit of sharing, you know, unready work, putting it out there for everybody. So it requires time and effort to actually create a sort of a trusted institutional space where people will be willing to share best practices, online resources they can find, they can talk to one another, and that's the best way of learning. But it needs to be as well, so it's kind of a mixture of this institutional, creating an institutional culture where people start sharing best practices and support each other, and having some sort of central support with people like learning technologies, online pedagogy experts that can go out and help within the department so that lecturers can focus on teaching really, and not of, again, grappling with technology.
Very good, Joanna. Andy or Ravi, do you want to say anything about the technology necessary to store this stuff? I mean, Joanna's talked a lot about the culture and the principles that need to be established and the trust that needs to be built up. But where do you put this stuff when people start producing it so that others can access it easily?
Yeah, I don't know if Ravi's got anything to add to this, but in terms of the problems with technology, I think, again, I say keeping things as simple as possible and in one place, and not asking too much of the learner to have to go to too many different places on the course, keeping the course very well structured. But also, I think I'd say we have a specialist technical queries forum on our online course, which Ravi is one of the main facilitators that kind of polices that forum, And we have a set of FAQs there with screenshots on how to overcome some of the issues around navigating through the course and things like that. I think also we try to keep the language of the online course and all the guidance and instructions as simple as possible, because we know that most of our learners have English as their second language, and so both the language of instruction and the language of the content is deliberately pitched in quite common English language where possible.
Just to add one more point, in some of our courses we put in place a tour that kind of pops up as soon as a learner goes to the course homepage for the first time. So there are a number of things. Technically, we try to keep the navigation simple around technical queries, but it is we sometimes recognize that it's not as user-friendly as it could be. And that's something we keep trying to work towards. At the same time, once learners become a little familiar, so then they can navigate through even other parts of our Moodle site. Now we've made a layout where people can explore courses, see which ones are open for enrollment, and enroll in those. And we've had a lot of learners completing multiple courses on our site. So there is sometimes an initial effort to put in, but yeah, it pays over time.
Very good. You've actually moved on to answer another question, which I got in the queue here. You've moved on from kind of marshalling resources for teaching, really, to how to present the resources in the most effective way for learning. And there's a good question here from Ronald Emojong. How do you maintain student engagement and avoid dropouts in courses? Who would like to have a go at that one?
I can have a go from the perspective of our research writing MOOCs. So we've found that we have a completion rate of around 50% for the MOOCs that we run. And I think the reasons behind that, and I can think of a few reasons, apart from our courses are great, but one of them is we tailored this course from the start for our core audience. We've been doing this for a few years. It was designed for a particular audience, which was early career researchers in the Global South. So we did lots of research and scoping beforehand to ensure that it was set at an appropriate level. Also, we make sure we don't set too many hard deadlines, and that really, I think, disincentivizes people when they go through MOOCs, and it does to me when I miss a deadline, and then the whole course is kind of ruined for me. And another thing, one thing that we, in our feedback for the courses, seemed to be really popular when we asked what they enjoyed the most, what they appreciated the most, was just a weekly reminder message, which is sent by email to all participants, just to check how everything is, to say what's been going on, what's coming up this week, what things they need to do, and so they can just click on the things that they have to do in that week. So just really simple things like that for me, I think, increase our completion rates.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. There's a kind of related question, I think, which is from Elizabeth Eppinger, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Do you have more examples of personal feedback and engagement, like including volunteers to spur and keep alive interesting discussions, and best practice examples of how to balance the workload of the instructors? Andy, why don't you let somebody else start on that one? I don't know who would be the best person to start it.
I can add something, but Andy is the better person to explain this then a little bit better. We have this principle of building groups of guest facilitators for our courses. Depending on which country it is, or whether it's MOOC for all, or we would train up guest facilitators, and then we have even built now different tools that help us with that. We have online tools that help with training, but I had also in a course for librarians, for example, we just did it by shadowing and mentoring of these guest facilitators in the first course, so that they could learn from us and then from each other. But Andy may want to add there something, because in the MOOCs they use this more extensively, also this principle of guest facilitators.
Yeah, Andy, do you want to elaborate on that, talking maybe about the sort of iterative growing number of facilitators and particularly the stewards, and possibly a bit about Author Aid version 2.0?
Yeah, so what happened is a few years ago when we had a set of online courses, and then we made the decision to move these into MOOCs, massive online open courses, and then we realised that there was just myself and Ravi running the course, and we probably didn't have the capacity to facilitate and moderate a course with over 1,000 or 2,000 people. So unfortunately for us, with the Author Aid network, we've got quite a large group of volunteer mentors who mentor early career researchers online. And so we put out a call to that group, so who wanted to be what we're calling a guest facilitator. And we got lots of responses to this, and we were able to form a team of about 20 people, different levels of their career, who are really keen on being involved in the course. And their main job really was to answer queries in the discussion forums and spark conversations in there. And that worked really well, because it made sure that when somebody did ask a question in the forums, it got answered. That started to grow through every course, because we then began to promote particularly active or energetic participants of those courses into guest facilitators for the next course. So we slowly grew our team year to year, and also, as Veronika said, we started to build in a module that developed the skills of those participants so that they could become facilitators. So that's how we've ensured that we've got enough hands on deck really to actually run the MOOCs.
Very good. And a follow-up question came in from Beth about what is a good ratio of facilitator to learner?
That's a good question. I mean, I said we usually aim for a team of about 20 people for guest facilitators, sometimes a few less. Now, the numbers that we normally get in our courses, and Ravi may be able to correct me, they generally go from about 1,500 to about 3,000 plus. And so that ratio to us really works quite well in terms of answering queries in the discussion forum. And then our team of 2 is able to answer more technical queries. Ravi, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, it might. Yeah, those numbers are what we usually see. It might seem like a really low ratio of teacher to participant, but well, again, in a lot of MOOCs, it's very hard to provide extensive facilitation capacity. But what we found is that with this ratio, our guest facilitators are volunteers, and we find that we also give guidelines to learners on how to write effective questions. So we've sometimes noticed in our courses that learners write posts that are, sometimes hard to engage with. Is that a question? Is that a comment? So we have given guidelines to learners, and that has really helped in the course that which is going on right now, the social sciences research writing course. And we found that most of the questions, the content related questions, are taken up by the guest facilitators or by the other participants. There is a dialogue. And we find that there's pretty good coverage, if I can use that word, of the questions by this team of facilitators, course after course. That's what we have seen. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks a lot. We're coming towards the end of our time, and there's a couple of big questions that I've avoided so far about how do we do this when we're new to this whole game, and then one to us as an organisation, what's the most difficult part of this? I'll come back to those in a minute. But before then, there's I hope a relatively brief and easy question from Ian Goldman, which is simply what kind of, where's it gone? What's a good discussion forum to use? So let's do that technical question, then we'll come on to the big ones at the end. I don't know who's the best one to answer that, maybe Ravi or Andy.
I guess the quick answer to that is that we use the forum that's integrated within Moodle. So the discussion forum just works really well. Everyone sent a copy of the emails, and that works really well. However, having said that, we have a group of Somali participants on our current online course, and they've decided to have their discussions entirely on WhatsApp and ignore the forum discussion in Moodle. So
yeah, and I think that you talked a little bit about that when you talked earlier on about keeping it simple, trying to avoid people jumping around into too many other things, and there is a good discussion forum in Moodle. Okay, here's big one, number one. What advice would you give to organizations that are having to rapidly change to digital learning? They may not have time to address all the design principles you've highlighted, and from your experience, what should they prioritize? And that is from Sharmila. And Joanna, how about you having a go at that?
Yeah, so I think what's most important is think short term now. So you can have a short term vision, and then you can do it better in the medium and long term. So where I would start is starting with your own context. So first of all, start with your students. So again, start with people. What do they have? What access to technology they have? What can you help them with? So worry at the moment about the connectivity of your students as well. Do they have enough bundles to connect to technology? Can you sort this problem out for them? Secondly, I think what you should not worry about at the moment is how quality designing your own resources and materials. I think there is a lot of open educational resources out there and open educational repositories that already have great content for also higher education teaching and learning that you might want to just simply adapt. So they are licensed for use. You will need to adapt them to your own context and to your own needs, but it's much easier than starting from scratch. So don't spend too much time on creating content. Just try to tap into those repositories and instead focus again on people, focus on creating spaces for interaction, for peer-to-peer learning and encouragement, kind of recognizing that, you know, it's not going to be perfect, and at this very stage you're doing the best what you can given the situation and the context, and then you can gradually develop a bigger vision for, you know, a more perfect online learning. So be kind to yourself and be kind to your students in the first place.
Very good. We really are coming to the end now. And I want to leave a couple of minutes at the end for Verity. Okay, maybe this one, a one-word reply from each of the INASP panel. Question from Lena: what major challenges do you experience in relation to your online training? And the U is bolded. I don't know whether that was Lena or Verity did that. What major challenges do we experience in relation to our online training? So I will pre-nominate. Andy, what's yours?
Bandwidth.
Okay, for others, not for us.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, bandwidth. I'm just going along the icons at the top. Veronika, what's yours?
I feel a major challenge is time, that you need to realize how much time it needs going online, because you will realize people, when in a training session, people will drop out, maybe coming in again, you need to explain again. So think about this, take your time for this. Don't rush.
Very good. Ravi?
I would say iteration is a word that comes to mind sometimes when making something on Moodle. And you keep iterating and you got to stop at some point. Yeah.
So it's not really iterating, it's just knowing when to stop iterating.
Yeah, when to stop.
Okay, this is good enough. Let's perfect is the enemy of good, which my colleagues will tell you I say annoyingly frequently. Joanna.
Well, I think that it's very much relates to what Veronika said. For me, it's this kind of expectations still around online that are out there, that it will be quicker and it will be, you know, it's just faster in design, just putting things online, and that's not true. So very often we have to navigate, and you will have to navigate across this kind of very tight deadlines and expectations that something should be already kind of online in a easy way, but that's a misconception.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much, participants, for your questions, panel for your answers. I'm now going to, if I can do it, share my screen, and just as a backdrop for Verity to say a few closing words. Let's just see if this is going to work. Hold on. Is that working?
Yes. Thanks. So thanks, John, and thanks for all of our panelists, and thank you for all of the participants for their fantastic questions. So there's a lot more that we received than we can answer today, but we will be working our way through them and seeing what other responses we can share in the forthcoming blog, and we'll send that all to you over the next, sort of week or so. So in the meantime, there are a couple of other initiatives that we just wanted to tell you about before we left. And we have a series of self-study tutorials, which are here on our Moodle site at the moment. We've got 3 currently, and there's one coming up in the next few weeks, which is actually about online facilitation skills. So we suggest you do check those out. That's this moodle.inasp.info link. And then we also wanted to let you know that we're running an online discussion and panel to coincide with the Development Studies Association conference, which is in June, and that's about co-creating some ideas that we can pilot in the future around online approaches. So if you look out on our social media, so on Twitter, it's @INASP.info. There's going to be some information coming up very soon about how you can get involved in that. So I think that's everything for today. So we just wanted to say thank you again for your time and attention, and do get in touch if you'd like to carry on the conversation or explore ways to work together in the future. So thank you from all of us, and goodbye.